Over the last year, Book of Hours has been there for you during the most challenging times of our lives. As an artist collaboration, we've given shape and depth to some of the most complicated topics of our time, making them easily accessible for those who seek to understand. We've given voice and space to the stories that often go ignored. Please take a moment to consider being a patron, make a donation, or join Rockfin. Thank you. Hello.
Hi, guys. How's everybody doing?
I hope you're doing well. Welcome to another edition of Pull Quote.
Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah.
We are very, very excited to bring you our next guest. A lot of you have emailed us saying that you were anticipating this particular episode. So I know he's a favorite among especially our creative and artistic friends.
Yeah, for sure.
Without further ado,
who's our guest today, Julie?
Our guest is CJ Hopkins.
And CJ Hopkins is an award-winning playwright, novelist, and political satirist. His plays have been produced and have toured at theaters and festivals in London, New York, and throughout the world. His political satire and commentary, I suppose, has been published by Consent Factory, Off Guardian, Zero Hedge, Cold Type, Rubicon, RT.com, Counterpunch, Dissident Voice, and widely translated internationally for many other publications. His dystopian science fiction novel Zone 23 is published by Snogsworthy, Swain, and Cormorant. Wow, like those birds in the ocean. Mm-hmm. We discovered CJ through interviews with him and his essays. And like Book of Hours, he was recently interviewed on TNT Radio. So welcome to Pull Quote, CJ Hopkins. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Thank you for agreeing to come on. We really, really appreciate it. You are definitely one of the favorites among our followers. So we're thrilled to have you today. Thank you.
Yeah. So I was reading the list of like publications, and I was looking on your site, and for each one of your essays, there's a whole list of places that feature these essays, and other than Consent Factory, do these other other blogs and websites, do they just pick it up, or do you submit it to them, or how does that work?
They just pick it up. I mean, everybody and his brother, picks up the essays and runs them these days. I developed a policy a long time ago of not trying to keep track or, police that at all. And basically, once my essays are out there, anyone is free to rerun them. There's, a small group of publications that I know and, that I just copy. Every time I post a new one, I just copy them out of courtesy and what have you. People like the Off Guardian and, Zero Hedge runs pretty much everything that I put out. True. And it's just a small list of places that I copy, but a lot of the other ones are just sites that have just picked them up and run them. And I try to keep a list. First of all, just some of the sites are small sites, and I think it's good to give them the recognition. And secondly, I think it guards against deplatforming and erasure. Mm-hmm. The more sites that have run it, the better the chances that it exists somewhere.
Yeah, that's what we do with our videos, is we make sure we're on different places. By the way, hi Rockfin.
Hi Rockfin, thanks for joining.
Well, let me just follow up there. I noticed that there's a lot of non-English. I noticed there's a Dutch one, the news but different, and then like Don Quixote in Spanish. How do they pick those up and then translate it themselves and just post it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they do.
So it's funny too that I noticed, and just along the same lines, I noticed that you're getting picked up by a lot of different political tendencies. We get that too. We have an audience that's not within our political realm. In fact, there's very few people who in the anarchist movement that we agree with anymore.
Right.
And we've had them on our show.
all 7 of them.
All 7 of them,
Right.
exactly. But I noticed that you got picked up by Libertarian Hub, Ron Paul Institute, and some anarcho-capitalist site called Instituto Rothbard in Portugal.
In Portugal, right? So I think, personally, I think that's incredible to have such a global reach and cross political divides, go into those different areas. Yeah. So that's one thing we noticed about you is that you don't hold back at all.
Well, I think it's interesting, and I kind of want to know your opinion on this. I mean, how is it? We're finding that we're getting picked up by conservative, and we're actually talking to people we would have never talked to before.
Right.
We featured a guy who's a conservative rancher, and we're both vegetarians, and so and certainly not conservative, and yet we relate to these people. So and we saw you on Geopolitics and Empire, and we've interviewed Hervoye.
Right.
He had us on his TNT show. So, how do you see this? I don't even know how to pose this question. It's just kind of an interesting phenomenon that's going on. I mean, what do you think about all that?
Way back in, when was it, 2016, when I started writing my political satire, my essays. Right at the beginning, I started to get picked up by people all across the spectrum, or rather, people on both extremes of the spectrum. I think, I think the people I'm missing are the people in the middle. But I'm completely fine with it. At this point, I used to identify as a leftist and say, I'm a leftist. And at this point, I don't really know what it means anymore. And I think, that's the case with a lot of people. So I've stopped, and I identify myself as a satirist.
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm completely fine. There are at this point, there are, I think, many issues that I completely disagree with people on the right about, and still agree with old-fashioned lefties on the left about. And I think there are a lot of issues that I completely disagree with people on the left about, and absolutely agree with conservatives about. So I really don't know how to label myself anymore politically, and I'm not really interested in doing it. In terms of all those different sites, picking things up, well, that makes me happy. I'm fundamentally, I'm an author, I'm a writer, and I am absolutely happy to speak to people all over the political spectrum. I'm not at all interested in, speaking to some tiny little, bubble audience. I want to speak to the broadest audience possible, and that's what I've been trying to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's what we're finding too. And we're happy for that. Actually, we're glad that we're being picked up by people. I think what it comes down to is your worldview anymore. And it's, whether you're for, bodily autonomy and freedom, or you're, for the fascies that, you were talking about with Clifton. Is that his name?
Clifton.
Yeah.
Right.
So on another interview that we watched, we were talking about before we went on air.
Right.
So, did you have some?
Well, I wanted to kind of go back, let's go back into the Wayback Machine. I know that you are, like us, a staunch critic of global capitalism, something you have coined as globocap. And so, we call it globalization or global capitalism or
whatever.
Sometimes I go into the neoliberal language where, I talk about neoliberalism and how it's really become normalized, especially in the Clinton administration. I feel like, based on what I've read from you, based on statements you've made, and interviews you've given that your sort of waking up moment was around the fall of the Soviet Union. Am I correct in that assessment?
Yeah, I don't know if it was really a waking up moment. That's when I was writing my first play, and and basically hopefully without rambling on for too long, that was just a huge historical phenomenon. The world that I grew up in, and the world that we had all been living in, which it was a world dominated by the Cold War and by the ideological conflict between left and right, and that world dissolved. And what I've been, I think, wrestling with ever since is the new world that I think is still just coming into being. It was 30 years ago. In historical terms, that's just the blink of an eye, really. I think when the USSR fell apart, the way I usually put it is, we became a single ideology world. It became a global capitalist world, and that last ideological conflict disappeared. I don't know if it was waking up as much as just trying to contend with that, trying to deal with what that means and how it has changed the world and what the new dynamics are, what the new power dynamics are.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for that. I think that now tell our audience what your first play was that came out of this whole experience.
It's called Horse Country. It's right. Actually there's a revival of it up 20 years later. It was done in New York originally. My ex-wife and I had a little theater company, and we put it up first, and then it was done again, and it was done in New York for a few years, and then went to Edinburgh and won some awards and got a lot of notice and toured all over the place. And that went on for a number of years. And then, of course, the tour was over and it had played everywhere and went dormant for a long time. There's a new production of it, I guess 20 years after Edinburgh, running around touring the UK right now, trying to tour the UK. They were originally scheduled to open this tour in March of 2020.
Wow.
Oh my God.
Really?
And bless them.
Wow.
Bless them. They persisted and they hung on, and they finally got the tour up and going. They played Wilton's in London, which is just a beautiful old vaudeville house. The play is a combination. It began really with me wrestling with Beckett, because as a playwright or somebody who was trying to write for the stage at that time, I just felt like, if I don't have anything to add after Beckett, then I don't really have any business writing for the stage.
Wow.
Because I just felt like it's in one of Beckett's short plays. I just felt like Beckett closed the book.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, in a lot of ways. I mean, after, I was at a production, I don't know, it was a presentation of several things at Theater Artaud in San Francisco. And it was Beckett's what is it, Breathe or something, where it's just like a long sigh. And then it was a presentation of another one of his plays, but and I thought, wow, that's pretty much it. That's about as minimal as you can get.
Top that.
there was just an absolutely brilliant production, best Beckett production I've ever seen. Stan Guntarski directed, I think, 4 of Beckett's shorts at the Magic in San Francisco.
Yeah.
And I think it's Ohio Impromptu. It doesn't matter. It's actually in one of his plays, and the one character says, nothing left to tell, close the book. And I took that to heart, having read and studied Beckett. I thought, yeah, he's right. He got it. There's nothing left to tell. So what do you do when there's nothing left to tell? What do you do on the stage? And so, as a young playwright, that's what I was wrestling with artistically. and then the wall fell, and the world changed, and that phenomenon bled into my aesthetic wrestling with Beckett. And the result of it was horse country, which I usually describe as Laurel and I usually describe it as Abbott and Costello on acid.
Well done. I love it.
I love that idea. Go ahead.
Oh no, I wanted to commend you too, just in general, just broadly speaking. I wanted to commend you for sort of staying true to what we believe is really going on over the last 2+ years. I guess it's been now, which is a global capitalization. We believe that many things are created, whether it's war or health scares. Many things are created, like marketing campaigns, to promote an idea, which would then bring in and usher in more capital, more global capital overreach, more neoliberalism, things like that. More fascism, in the true sense of the word, meaning the public-private partnerships. So we see this only as, coming from the perspective of, concerned about the working class and concerned about poor communities, concerned about the further marginalization of the middle class and small business owners and people like that who have really built they're sort of the heart and soul of the United States. And I just so that's the only lens that we ever saw it through. And although we have hosted doctors and we have talked a little bit about the science behind the idea that we have a legitimate pathogen in our midst, we've delved into it a little bit. But to getting back to you, is I want to commend you for staying focused on the real issue, which is this global capitalization. Have you had any pushback for not delving into the more science or health aspect of this, in your personal life or your professional life? What has that experience been like for you?
I think I've had a few arguments in my personal life. I haven't had, I don't think I've really had any pushback professionally. I think there are so many, good people who are much more knowledgeable about the scientific aspects of the whole COVID phenomenon. Excuse me, who have been confronting it on that level. I don't think I don't have the knowledge to do that, and so I tried to stay with my focus. When I started writing my political satire, my essays, it was first it was Bernie, and then it was Trump that kind of pulled me out of my hermetitude, or whatever the word is. I wasn't on social media. I had been ignoring everything, basically just living like a hermit and writing. And it was really the Bernie and the Trump phenomenon that pulled me out of it. And what interested me about that is that it felt like something was happening for the first time in a long time. We talked about, okay, the Soviet Union fell apart. It became a global capitalist world, a single ideology world, and that pretty much continued. In my perspective, what happened is Globocap said, "Oh, okay, great, we own the world, so let's go around and destabilize and restructure and privatize everything we can." Possibly get our hands on. Let's start in Eastern Europe, and then there's the Middle East that needs some serious restructuring, and the war on terror, and so on. And it just seemed like it was just a global capitalist juggernaut for years and years and years. What interested me about Bernie Sanders and Trump is what I saw as a populist uprising, a populist backlash against global capitalism and against its ideology. And that interested me, and it got me excited. So I was covering this response, global capitalism's response to this populist uprising, all during the Trump years, when the COVID narrative was rolled out, when the whole phenomenon started. Very quickly I saw this as an extension of the I don't know what to call it, an operation, an extension of Globocap's response to this populist uprising. In other words, I didn't see it as a new thing. It made perfect sense to me. We're living in really interesting times, and if I go back and put it in that context again, global capitalism dominating the entire territory of the planet.
Right.
All that's left is little pockets of resistance.
Right.
Okay, those little pockets of resistance may be as big as Russia. They may be as big as Iran, Syria. They're large countries, but they're still just pockets of resistance within one unified global capitalist system.
Right.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And what I think I'm watching and what I've written about is basically a clear and hold operation. All right. Do you know what that is?
I just came across that term the other day when I was reading one of your latest essays. So yeah, tell our audience and tell us too.
Basically, if you're an invading force, you invade a country, you occupy it. Great. So now you occupy the country, you own it. What's left to do? What's left to do is clear and hold. And that means you go around in the country that you're now occupying, and you find every little pocket of resistance, every little pocket of insurgency or possible insurgency, and you wipe those pockets out until you have fully established your new program, your new ideology. And that same principle applies, I think, to what global capitalism has been doing throughout the entire world for the last 30 or so years. Right?
Yeah.
And it makes what we've been watching, what we watched during the last 2 years, is global capitalism entering a completely new phase, which is a much more openly totalitarian phase, a much more directly authoritarian phase. Not completely, because it can't go all the way, and I've written about that in some of my pieces.
Right.
But nonetheless, much more directly authoritarian, and I would argue even totalitarian. Of course, global capitalism can't come out, put jackboots on, and start waving, swastika flags and act like open totalitarianism. It has to couch it all inside of a narrative. And the narrative that it has been couched in for the last 2 years is this pathological narrative. Right? It's like, we're not oppressing you because we're totalitarians and we're trying to wipe out, insurgency and create Gleichschaltung throughout the whole planet. No, we're doing this for your own good because there's a really scary bug out there. Yeah. Anyway, I could get lost in all of that, and we probably don't have time for it. Well, I see it. The point is, I see it as one. There's one line that runs through it all. If you look at it through this perspective, it's not a series of strange, bizarre events. It all kind of makes perfect sense and follows a continuum.
Yeah, we agree, and we started really seeing it showing its current ugly face at that point that you were talking about, the Sanders and Trump campaigns. We were registered Green Party. And U.S. Green Party is different than European Green Parties. But anyway, it doesn't matter anymore. But we were still voting then. And, we encountered so much pushback and so much just negative attitudes from people, especially in social media, that it was a weird phenomenon and very hurtful in a lot of ways, because we were hearing from these liberal friends who were criticizing us greatly for taking the stand that we took. And then when the COVID narrative hit, it was like, oh, this is a familiar place.
Right. It felt very familiar.
We're like, oh, that's where that shit came from. But, then as we started doing our investigations into things and making our video essays, we realized, as you said, it's a line that runs through all of this. Mm-hmm. And, we feel that, we did a video called Communitarianism, which, basically is talking about the philosophy of communitarianism, which they say comes out of the extreme middle, right? The centerists. So you have your Clintons and your Obamas and even H.W. Bush, Daddy Bush, mm-hmm. As being part of this sort of, extreme center, and with a neoliberal and centrist, position. I mean, sorry, globalist position, right? And I'm sure it goes back even further than that, but and we can talk about that if you want. But it was interesting how we started seeing these things pop up, and how they were coming at it from this sort of community spirit, kind of like do it for the good of the community and do it for everybody else. It's like, I now have the power to save somebody else's life by getting a shot.
Right. We're just following orders, generally. I really do like what you said, how this was the mechanisms behind the COVID narrative, global capitalization, was a response to what came out of the populist movement that we saw in, with Bernie and Trump. That's really interesting to me, because as he just mentioned, we experienced a microcosm of that response, like a very small example of that, when we made a decision to operate outside of the two-party system, and we had a personal response from our liberal friends at that time, a pushback on that. So on a global scale, capitalism is responding to populism that's coming from like a working class position, or coming from, I'm almost ashamed to say that it was Bernie Sanders who kind of woke me up a little more. Of course, I woke up, in my 20s with the Clinton administration, when I saw, a concerted effort to rip away social safety nets that had given, poorer people an opportunity to have access to a meritocracy, like education or, a decent living. And Clinton ripped away those social safety nets. So I saw a bit of that in my early 20s, and I was starting to sort of walk into that area, like questioning what these liberals were really doing to us, when I enrolled in school and got a job and got really busy with life, and kind of walked away from my concern about what was happening politically. It was the Bernie Sanders Trump movement that sort of woke me up. And it was the first time I had ever heard that the United States had the highest rate of mass incarceration in the whole world. And I was like, here I am, in my 40s when I'm hearing this, and I'm thinking, that can't be right. That can't be right. And so I started to do a little digging, and sure enough, we hold the proud number, that we're the country that holds the most prisoners out of the entire world, which is just incredible to me. So that is also a red flag. That should tell people that the systems that we're being introduced to through the COVID measures are the systems that our prison population have been dealing with for a long time. So I like how you make that comparison, how the one is a reaction to the other. That really hit home for me. Thank you for that.
Well, again, if you go back to the model that I'm proposing, it's the drum that I'm beating all the time, brave new global capitalist world. If you go back and you track it from the end of the Soviet Union until now, it's actually completely logical. What you're watching is a system that controls the entire territory of the earth, except for these little pockets of resistance and insurgency. And what it's doing is trying to, wipe out those little pockets, destabilize them, restructure them, regime change them, and open them up and make them, absorb them into, the globocap system. And what it's doing in the domestic territories, let's call it that, the Western world that we all live in, is trying to create ideological uniformity, and that effort to create ideological uniformity has just intensified year by year and decade by decade. Just tracking it, again, there was this eruption of populist, backlash. 2015, 2016, there was Brexit in the UK. A lot of, neo-nationalist populists were rising up and pushing back in Europe. And then Trump comes along. Can I curse on your show?
Yes,
Sure.
Yes, absolutely, you can.
Yeah, my elevator, pitch analysis of, what happened of the Trump phenomenon is basically a lot of the American working classes and American people, they saw a chance to elect an unauthorized president. And it was just this big fuck you to the
Yep.
And it was for the first time people and it would have been the same had Bernie been the candidate. He would have also been. And this, I've written scathing things about Bernie. It's that Bernie is, just a massive disappointment. But nonetheless, symbolically, he was set up. He was on the verge of being the same unauthorized president. Right. It just happened that Trump became the unauthorized president.
Right.
That happened. I'm trying to get back, Julie, to where you started from. If you follow that line again, you were talking about working class people, and you were talking about social democracy. Basically, is what you were talking about. Again, during the Cold War, the capitalist countries, they needed social democracy, right? The social democracy. This was the counterbalance. When people said, we need socialism, we need socialism, communism. The capitalist countries, no, you don't. We have social democracies. Europe is all, there's social democracies all over Europe. We have subsidized education and subsidized healthcare. And okay, the United States was always just a raw marketplace. It was, never really a society. But most of Europe, was social democrat. As soon as the USSR fell apart, what you start seeing is a systematic effort to disassemble the infrastructure of social democracy, right? And it has been happening faster in the UK, for example, than in Germany or France. But nonetheless, that is the movement that has been happening. You were talking about the Clintons, and the Clintons were the perfect tools to continue this movement in the United States. When Reagan did it, it was like, oh my God, Reagan is doing, and then the Clintons came rolling in and said, oh no, we're liberals. Yeah, we're liberals.
Yeah.
And they did a better job of it than Reagan did. Right. Again, what I'm trying to point to, and people are probably sick of it, but I'll keep beating this drum. I'm trying to point to this broad movement, this broad operation that has been running for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
And the what we've just been through during the last 2 years it's not anomalous. It's not something new. It's just a huge, drastic leap forward. I wrote about this way back in the beginning, in the spring of 2020. I think whatever else it is, and I think it's a big complex phenomenon that you can look at from many different viewpoints, but whatever else it is delivering a message to those of us in the West. And the message is, shut up and toe the line and vote for who we tell you to vote for. Vote for the puppets that we put up. Shut up. Stop with the populist stuff. Use the pronouns. Eat the bugs. Do whatever the fuck we tell you to do,
right.
or we will lock you down like prisoners. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we will take a coronavirus and we will turn it into the apocalypse.
Right.
And we'll declare martial law, and you will have to show your papers and wear symbols of compliance to official ideology on your face to buy food. And this is an authoritarian, totalitarian message, and I believe it is all part of the response to this populist backlash that erupted in the West. They did it for 4 years during the Trump administration without the pathology, without the virus. Back during the Trump years, I was a Trump-loving Strasserist, red brown infiltrator. So this is what liberals and leftists, were calling me. And then when COVID started, of course, I immediately became a red brown, Nazi-loving conspiracy theorist, anti-vaxxer. None of these epithets, none of these names actually mean anything.
Right.
What they're strategic terms to demarcate those who are not conforming to the official ideology, whatever it is.
Right.
And anyway, I'm babbling, but
no, it's great. Thank you.
What I'm saying is this operation has been in progress for 30 something years, and we have just been through, the most intensive phase of it so far, but it's the same operation.
Yeah. And it's going to take different flavors. It's going to be, sustainable development goals, or it will continue again with whatever medical interventions they require. I just got an email from New York Times this morning. I get their morning emails, and it's always like, oh, here's another dose of propaganda, but let's see what they have to say. But they're basically warning that another wave of whatever they're calling it,
the variant,
the variants, or whatever it is.
Variant du jour.
is coming again. Another wave of COVID-19 is coming again, and it's like, what you can do about it. Of course, that article is hidden behind a paywall, so you have to pay for your own oppression.
Speaking of I'm sorry. Did you want to say something?
I just wanted to say, I think the climate change thing is going to be used, and various other things are going to be used. But I think the pathologization of society, of virtually everything, excuse me, is kind of key. This was one of the main themes in my novel. And I actually referred to it and put it in initial caps, the pathologization of virtually everything, because it works. What this pathologization does by pathologizing the totalitarianism, it allows those who are going to support it, no matter what, it gives them this excuse so that they can basically say, oh, we're not fascists, we're not totalitarians or anything. We're just trying to help people and cure diseases and what have you. Again, I'm probably going to just bore people to death, but if you go back 20 or 30 years, you can also track the pathologization of society that has just been happening gradually, step by step by step by step. My novel Zone 23. I didn't write it because I'm some kind of a prophet. It's just that I've been paying attention to this.
Right.
And it'll drive people crazy because I'm a smoker. But when I remember, I grew up in a world, we used to smoke on airplanes.
Right. Right. I remember those days. Yeah.
It's crazy. And anyone who's watched Mad Men, can see the world we grew up in. And yes, cigarettes are bad for you. Many things in life are bad for you. If you go back and look at that campaign, the campaign that demonized cigarettes and ended up bringing us to the world that we're in now, where I think the UK is actually considering banning smoking entirely from the country, or trying to.
Wow.
And that's not it. I'm reading Bobby Kennedy's book at the moment, and I'm reading all of the historical stuff, from the AIDS crisis and what have you. And I don't know if any of your guests are old enough to remember this, but I remember very clearly when Fauci came out and the worldwide panic began. That everyone's going to get AIDS. It's heterosexuals can get it, and everybody, you can get it from touching your your sister's roommate. And what I've watched, I'm 60 years old, and what I've watched is a world that went from my mother saying, get a stick and go play in the construction site next door. Maybe. There's got to be some, there'll be some frogs in there that you can hit with a stick. Watch out for the opossums. I'll just tell you just a real quick, anecdote. I grew up in Miami back before Miami was completely developed, so we were right on the border of the Everglades. And there was a canal that was full of turtles and all kinds of wild things. And I used to ride my bike down there when I was a kid. One day I cut my foot, and I cut it really badly. Blood was just gushing out of it. And I rode all the way home on my bike with, bleeding profusely. And I get to the front door, and there's a trail of blood, running up the walkway to the front door. And I bang on the front door. And my mom opens the front door, and Mom, I cut my foot, I'm going to die. And she looks down and she says, if you think you're bringing that foot into my house on my carpet, you're out of your mind. Go around the back, where I'll meet you there with the hose.
It's the hose, right?
This is the world that I grew up in. It was a world where, people were not paranoid about injuries, illnesses, what have you. Yes, people got injured, people die. It's part of life, and we have progressed to this world now where the German government, for example, still, even now, after the whole narrative has completely collapsed, still they're trying to pass mandatory vaccinations. Yeah, they can't do it for the entire population. That's what they tried to do, but that's failing. So now they want to pass mandatory vaccinations for everyone over 50. And the reason is a virus could happen. There could be a virus in the fall.
I know. Right? Yeah.
And there could be a virus in the fall. So we need to inject everyone over 50 with this, mRNA experimental vaccine that the pharma companies have created. Yeah. And that we bought, that we just spent billions of euros on. Right. So we need to forcibly inject everyone over 50 with this stuff, because there could be a virus.
Wow.
And people are discussing this and arguing this in the German Bundestag as if it were rational,
right?
As if this were a rational thing to debate,
right?
I babbled again, but again, what I'm tracking is this pathologization of society,
right?
Yeah, and why is it happening? It's because it allows control. It allows control.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And when you occupy a territory and you're not fighting an external enemy anymore, the only thing that's left to do is control the territory that you occupy. And that's where we are.
Yeah. I have a personal anecdotal story. It's very, very short. I take public bus, everywhere. I live in Pittsburgh, so there's a bus very close by. And and it was raining, and there was a little boy sitting on a bucket under an awning waiting for the bus with his mother, and he had a mask on. And I said to him, don't you want to breathe fresh air? Take off your mask and you can breathe fresh air. And he said, and this speaks to the pathologization of our society, this speaks to that. He says, well, you never know, because you never know. And he wouldn't take his mask off and breathe fresh air. And he's 8.
And
so
this is heartbreaking. This is heartbreaking, and this is what is being done to kids. In Germany at the moment. Yesterday was Freedom Day in Berlin, and today is Freedom Day for the rest of Germany. Okay. Which means that now people are only required to wear useless masks on public transportation and in planes and in hospitals and in various other select places. So we're not required to wear them to go into shops anymore, or restaurants or bars or what have you. And right. the segregation of the unvaccinated is now over. Is officially over. Okay. And the response to this is the vast majority of German society is furious, is absolutely hysterically furious, and people are now wearing masks, out of solidarity, and the original excuse for imposing this mandate on everybody is gone, and it has become a purely ideological issue, purely a matter of conformity or non-conformity.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. We just talked to a friend who still lives in San Francisco, and we are so glad we dodged that bullet and got out when we did. But before all this nonsense happened. But he was telling us that they've pulled back on the mandates of wearing masks in bars and restaurants and wherever. Right. I imagine you still have to wear it on the bus. They still make you wear one here in Pittsburgh on the bus, but everywhere else it's like fine. Medical and transportation seem to be the only two, and the schools seem to be the only two things. They stopped even requiring the school bus drivers from wearing masks, right? But the kids still do. Tell me how that makes sense. But anyway, he told us that because they stopped requiring this, people started wearing 2 and even 3 masks around. To either like express their anger or just their paranoia or whatever, wherever place they're coming from psychically.
It's got to be a joke. Like, I just can't, I can't rationalize intelligent human beings, adults, being that stupid. I just can't. Like, it's got to be a joke.
I don't think it's stupidity at all. It's actually classic totalitarianism. It's what it is. To give people a break. The vast majority of people were terrorized. They were terrorized from the beginning. I did a Twitter thread that Off Guardian collected. It's still on their site. One big long one or 2 of them, I don't know. Off Guardian has it up on their site. Just collecting the headlines from mainstream press back in March and April of 2020. And if you go back and look at those headlines now, you will see how intense the rollout of this new pathologized totalitarianism was. People were terrorized. They were publicizing, death rates of 3.4%, and billions of people were going to die. And then immediately they rolled out the, have your papers, get in line, stay inside, or we will arrest you and hurl you to the ground. And then the death trucks and the hospitals, and just lie after lie after lie. Was pumped out. People were terrorized, and when you terrorize people, when you just scare the living shit out of people like this, and at the same time you announce to them, oh hi, we're the authorities. By the way, we're going full totalitarian on you, right? It's almost martial law. Okay, so think about whether you want to disobey us or not. All right. And the vast majority of people say, I don't want them to crack my head. I don't, you know,
Wow.
I don't want to get punished. I'm going to shut up and follow orders.
Yeah.
So Julie, I just want to say, I don't think it's stupidity. I think
Okay.
it is the standard reaction when societies transform from something resembling democracy into a more authoritarian, more totalitarian form. This is the standard response. The
Right.
vast majority of people will try to protect themselves, protect their families, will shut up, keep their heads down, and will follow orders.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
Yeah.
absolutely predictable.
yeah, absolutely.
It's a form of mental illness, though. I
Well,
mean,
that develops.
it
That's part of the pathology, right?
feels like it's developing into mental illness.
Well,
Why?
they've been conditioned for 2 years now.
There you go.
Yeah.
In the beginning, I think it was just raw fear, but 2 years is a long time,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
this has become reality
Yeah.
for the majority of the masses. It has become their reality. It's not a uh, it's not even like a political affiliation.
Okay.
In their reality, the world is now this incredibly dangerous place where they could be attacked and killed by some malignant microbe at any moment.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, we're seeing that this is also coming through in other forms during 2020 in like June and July. We've talked about this a lot with our audience are like, oh, that again. June and July, fireworks were going off everywhere in the United States, and our little community here in Pittsburgh, it was happening all day long, and like
Oh yeah.
for like months you
Months.
were
Yeah.
getting these professional grade fireworks going
Our
off.
house smelled like sulfur,
Sometimes, yeah,
you
because it was
know.
so close.
And I would tell him every day, this is the only way that they can bomb us without destroying us.
Hmm.
We would be in the middle of trying to record for a video essay, and we'd have to stop because at 11 o'clock in the morning it would be professional grade fireworks, a block away from us, filling our whole area with smoke, and just hours and hours
Noise.
of noise and bombs going off. And the whole community around here was traumatized.
Hmm.
The children, the pets, the adults, people were starting to talk to each other like, what is going on? What's with these fireworks?
Or you'd
You
say,
know?
these are professional grade fireworks. Where did they come from? These people, nobody around here can afford this kind of thing. And then you get somebody on Nextdoor or Facebook or something. JP, I could afford those if I wanted to. And I'm like, okay, you're missing my point. The other
Yeah.
thing that then happened once that trailed off, and we started seeing shooters coming into the neighborhoods. They're not killing anybody. They're not hurting anything. Well,
Just
they've
shooting.
casings around, and they might hit the occasional car window or whatever. But they just show up, shoot off a round or two, and then split.
Right. And
Okay.
we witnessed one, or he did. And
Yeah.
so right in front of our house, and it was very theatrical. It was very theatrical.
Yeah,
Like
I
he
mean,
was,
the hoodie and shooting forward and walking, and it was
and we're
all
both going
theater.
like, hmm.
But the thing is, and this is my point, and you brought this up, and what triggered this idea was that people started begging for martial law.
Oh, exactly. The community started, saying, we need martial law. They literally used that term.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, wow, this isn't good. So people will beg for their own oppression, it seems. I noticed that we come from sort of corporate backgrounds, design, and, I worked for Le Cordon Bleu San Francisco for 5 years, and so I'm very familiar with the corporate background. But we also noticed that in the corporate culture, those that are middle management or below they also sort of beg for their own oppression, in order to keep their job. So it feels like a lot of the tactics that are being used come from that corporate ideology where, trust the system and trust,
And be part of the group.
and be part of the group, and trust the project managers, and trust the CEO. We know what's best for you, that kind of thing. So, we were never afraid. And I think this also speaks to, I don't know if it's like, I think, somebody who we highly regard, a writer who we highly regard, sort of insinuated that we were cynical because we don't really believe, and we're not really afraid. Because if I feel like we've seen it all already, even before COVID, like we saw a billionaire every 80 blocks popping up in San Francisco all of a sudden. We saw this corporate overreach, this globalization, globocap. You know what I'm saying? So I feel, and then we saw the huge disparity of the managerial class and the poverty class in San Francisco and in places like New York. So I feel like we've already seen it. So when COVID came, we didn't really respond to it. We weren't afraid. We,
we criticized it.
We criticized
like,
it like you do,
yeah.
like many people we've met have done, and that's good.
Yeah.
But I don't know. I think you have to have a level of cynicism towards this whole thing in order to navigate it and keep your sanity. You know.
Well, I don't think of it as cynicism. What I often refer to it as the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think. I think what you're talking about when COVID was rolled out, when or when the Bernie phenomenon started, or the Trump phenomenon started, what have you, or when when Russia invaded the Ukraine. What I do is I look at these events and I try to ask, okay, what's happening in the in the political historical context that I understand based on my analysis of events. What is happening, and maybe I can't completely describe it, but okay, this is sort of how it fits into my understanding, which is based on history and
right.
that
and political analysis and what have you, and then there's the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And the movie, during the Trump years, the movie was, and I'm no fan of Donald Trump. I lived, in the same city with a man for, 15 years. He puts his name on steaks, for God's sakes. But I've been accused of, being a Trump lover for years now. I forgot what I was just going to say. The movie, in the movie, Donald Trump, Donald Trump, the clown, the former, reality TV, is, literally the second coming of Adolf Hitler and a Russian operative.
Yeah.
Okay. And people actually, whether they believed it or just double think, but people actually lived their lives for 4 years based on this. You can't call it an analysis. It's a movie. And then when the COVID narrative was rolled out, and I have people have called me a COVID denier for all these years. I said, I'm not a COVID denier. I believe there are coronaviruses. There have always been coronaviruses. I'm perfectly willing to believe that there's a new nasty one. I actually think I've had it a couple of times. But then in the movie, this new coronavirus is now this apocalyptic virus that somehow warrants the radical transformation of global society. Right? I think what I'm trying to get at is the difference between reality, whatever your analysis of it is, and there's, of course, room for disagreement and argument about what's actually going on. The difference between that and the movie that is being pumped out by the authorities and their propaganda machine, it's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. I think it's more dystopian. Maybe it's why I haven't been able to get my second dystopian novel going, is because we've reached a level that is more dystopian than anything that I could possibly imagine.
Right. Exactly.
Yes, we have. I'll agree.
This is a long way, Julie, of saying, not believing in the movie doesn't make you a cynic.
Okay.
What
it doesn't make us cynics.
Right.
No, and what I tell you repeatedly is that what's being done to us is cynical,
Right.
rather than what our response to this,
Right.
And I like how you put that, the movie, because that's what it definitely feels like. And our guest last week, Dr. Christian Northrup, was talking about when Trump was elected. The 18-year-old freshman at Yale had to be served hot chocolate while wrapped in blankets to soothe the pain of the election of Donald J. Trump. And
yeah, and then she was comparing them to the 18-year-olds that had, gone to war and
in World War II, right?
And died on a hill. It's like, what happened? I would like to, because we're coming up on the hour, so I would like to bring up his website, so that people can actually see. We were talking before we went live here. We were talking about your website. He's a designer, and it's a very friendly website. It's very easy to navigate, very easy to and there's not a lot of distractions with it. It's just very simple, and so we really appreciate that, coming from sort of a design background. So very very well done. How can people reach you if they want to?
So just stick me into a search engine and you'll find me very easily. The consentfactory.org is my satirical blog. And you've got my straight website, my author's website, up on the screen right now. The Consent Factory is my shtick. Basically, it's set up as a shady half think tank, half consulting operation, and what have you.
Okay.
And this is my author's website, which is a little bit more earnest. And I've got a Substack, and just stick me into a search engine, and you'll find me in 5 seconds.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right, great.
Very good.
We'll put those addresses to Consent Factory and to your website into the show notes, so people can follow them there. And otherwise, stick your name in a search engine, anyone you choose.
Are you on Twitter? You're still on Twitter, right?
Oh yeah.
Under Consent.
Well, I haven't checked since we started our interview.
Well, now that you're associating yourself with us, you may not be there anymore.
Good luck. No,
I'm kidding.
You should.
Twitter is zeroing in on Consent Factory. I'm not sure how long Consent Factory will be there. Again, most of the action occurs on Consent Factory, and I also have a same separation. I also have a Twitter that's me, and I try to keep that to more artistic stuff.
Good, yeah.
And I fail, but most of the action happens on Consent Factory, and Twitter is censoring it pretty hard right now. The latest thing, people were getting warnings that my tweets, contained age-restricted adult content. So apparently, I'm not just a Trump-loving, Russia-shilling, anti-vax, conspiracy theorist, Nazi, but now I'm also a pornographer.
Mm-hmm.
Oh no.
We were on Vimeo.com, which was you have to pay to have a certain amount of content up there. And they were taking our videos down and telling us that our content encouraged self-harm to young people, and some other stuff that, where did that come from? Because that's not even in our work.
In anything.
So there was no violence in our work.
They just pull stuff out and throw it at you.
It's true. It's getting truly Orwellian. And again, just to beat the drum one more time, again, this is part of the message. The censorship, the deplatforming that's going on. This is part of what I believe. It's part of the broader message, which is shut up and follow orders.
Yeah.
Or we'll deplatform you. We'll demonetize you. We'll censor you into oblivion.
Yeah, and we've been seeing that with our doctor guests and some of our other professional guests, and it's really sad. just to that they're going after people's living after they got after they lost their livelihood because of the COVID movie or marketing campaign, as we like to call it. And they try to do something else. They go after them for being whatever they're accused of, and taking away their income that way as well. And it's just crazy.
It is.
And I know what's going on. It's just when you and as you've expressed before in other interviews, it's like you try to describe it, and you just they look at you like you're a lunatic.
Yeah. Look what they did to people in Canada.
Yeah.
People, regular working class people who sent $50 in to help support the truckers and the protesters who were out there perpetrating completely classic nonviolent civil disobedience. And regular working class people, sent them $25, $50, and the government shut down their bank accounts.
Right.
And we
turned off their bank. We're going to starve and freeze your family.
That's
right.
Yeah, and aside from that, also using like white supremacy language and
accusing people of being domestic terrorists or supporting domestic terrorism. Very quickly, before we wrap up, do you have anything in the works as far as like anything you can do in Berlin as far as doing a play or something on the creative spectrum? Do you miss that part of? I wanted to get more into that, but we're out of time. But I'm sure you miss that world.
Is there
anything in the works?
Any projects you're working on?
My old plays are being done. I told you about Horse Country in the UK, and a little theater in Connecticut just did a production of The Extremists. I haven't been writing new plays for the theater. I do when I get a commission. And I got a very interesting commission and wrote a crazy thing. I have no idea what the status of it is. It's supposedly in the works. I've been really focused more on my essays and on prose. I've got a second novel. The Zone 23 was meant to be the first of a trilogy. And so the second part of the trilogy is long overdue. I have to find the time to write it. And also part of the problem was it was going to take place during a lockdown.
Right.
And just as I was about to start in on it, everything happened. And I just felt like I can't write this now.
Yeah, you don't write history, do you? You write.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem. Is I can write my essays, I can write the history, but I can't do this other novel right now unless I let go of this idea completely. I've been wrestling with it ever since. What is about to come out, one way or the other, and I'm not sure how it's whatever. I'll shut up about it. But one way or the other, in the next couple of months, there will be the publication of Consent Factory Essays, Volume 3.
Wow.
Right, Volume 1 and Volume 2 are out already, been out for a while, and Volume 3, which will cover the COVID years, 2020 and 2021. And the tentative title of it is The Rise and Fall of the COVIDian Cult. That'll be out soon. I'm not exactly sure what soon means.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely.
Excellent.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
Cool. All right. Well, we're going to say goodbye and thank you for appearing or coming on the show for, and talking to us and doing the work that you do. It was
a delightful conversation. Thank you so much for all of your wisdom and input. And, I like that you double down on your opinion and you double down on your position. And I feel like I've learned something from this. So thank you for that.
Well, good. Makes me feel like I'm doing a little good. It's been a pleasure talking to you. Thanks again for having me on.
Yeah,
absolutely. Our pleasure. Thank you
very much. All right. Thanks. All right.
I hope everybody enjoyed that. And we want to thank you for joining us today.
as usual, we love that hearing from you. So leave notes in the, in the show notes and your comments. That's great.
Thank you for all your comments.
If you want to get in touch with us by post, just email us at info@book-of-hours.com, and we'll send you an address to send that to.
Right.
I don't know, anything else?
Yeah, you can join Patreon for as little as $2 a month, or you can leave a tip on our Rockfin page for whatever you can afford.
Yeah.
That would really help us out. Keep this going.
Well, we got banned from YouTube for a little bit, but because we dared present Christiane Northrup, but when we're back, you can also leave a tip there. Well, for now, anyway.
Right. I think we'll be back. So right now we're streaming on Rockfin and Twitter and
Facebook,
and Facebook and all of the pages. We will be on YouTube either Wednesday or Thursday.
Yeah. So you can look for that later. You can also join Rockfin for $9.99 a month and get access to all the
Rockfin content.
Yeah, that is exclusive. So think about that as well. And if you do it through Book of Hours, we get the credit. So
so that would help us a lot. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So
all right, we do have a couple of things in the works. We have something called The Reason, which JP and I are working on. It's a script, and we're looking for the supporting music and visuals for that. So that should be available for everybody by the end of the week.
Hopefully, yeah.
And I'm continuing to do little audio blogs on our audio narratives on our blog page. So you can support us that way too by sharing that around if that interests you.
Please share. Share and enjoy.
All right. And we want to thank you again for joining us today, and we will see you soon.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, guys.
Pull Quote is made possible by our patrons and supporters. You can help us continue to do the work that we do by becoming a patron at patreon.com/bookofhours. Join Rockfin or leave us a tip at rockfin.com/bookofhours. Or leave us a one-time donation at paypal.me/bookofhours. Thank you.